Okay. It is a little bit after 8:30. I don't know what happened. We had some technical problems that uh, locked out my internet for a little bit, so I had to shut down and reboot. Anyway, welcome to week 4. This is week 4 of Introduction to Corrections, J115, uh, the winter quarter. And I can tell you, it's definitely winter around here. We've had a series of 50-degree days um, for a little while, and then all of a sudden we had an ice storm this morning, and um, roads were really bad. I mean, extremely bad. Real bad accidents, icy conditions. Even people were on the sidewalks here in the Romeoville area wearing not roller skates but ice skates on the sidewalks, and pretty bad. And tomorrow they say it's going to get back up into the 50s, and it's just up and down. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started right here. And I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. And you see information that you should be familiar with already here. I'm going to go down to our week 4 module for the written assignment. The written assignment, your state prison classification. And it gives you the breakdown of what you have to do, identify your state and the number and types of prisons that you have, and explain each type of prison assigned. And then for your grammar, APA, all of that. Now, many of you will lose 5 points and have been because of the fact that you don't do the APA properly. The APA requires citations and references. I point that out to you many times. As a matter of fact, if I scroll up some more, you can see right here, all written assignments should be in APA format. And that means citations in the body of the paper and references at the end. Not or, but and. And then also, you should have citations throughout your paper. And what happens a lot of times is that students will put a citation and throw it at the end of the paper, and that's not acceptable because citations indicate that the statements that you make in your paper, where the sources are that you got the information to come up with your statement, even if you find yourself in a situation where there. So if you could turn off your camera, um, Jasmine, just shut your camera off. Okay, good. Um, and so anyway, you want to make sure that you do follow this. So let's go back down and let's take a look at that. Okay. All right. All right. The reason why I say turn off the camera is because it interferes sometimes with the bandwidth, particularly if more people come on. So anyway, make sure that you do your APA properly because that will enhance the number of points that you have. So moving right along here, you go all the way down. As you can see, you have a course project that's due this week, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. Then, of course, your next lecture, which will be week 6, and by the time we get to week 6, we'll be at the halfway point of this class. So time moves pretty fast. And so these are the recordings. Again, um, for clarification of the project, you should have the open house. And if you can't find it, all you do is, copy and paste the link for the open house, put it in your browser, and you can see it again. But you should be saving it. And then your week 2 lecture. Okay, so now let's go over and look at our announcement for the week. Jails and prisons we're going to talk about very briefly. And then reminder your reading assignment, section 3 and 6 of the text, and deal with the activity prison versus jail. And then interview regarding jail issues today and look inside a maximum security prison. We're going to attempt to do some of these. Sometimes some of these don't come out very well, but we're going to try. If not, then you could go and look at them on your own within the module in your classroom section that you see as students. The discussion assignment, issues facing jails. Your initial post was due on last night, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. A few students have gotten confused with the initial post because of the first week we had Wednesday, and just if you go back and you look at the announcement for week 1, which you probably can't see it now, then you'll see what I'm talking about. Because in that week 1 announcement, it said that your initial posts were due on Wednesday for the first week, but then it reminded you that starting the following week and every week after it would be on Tuesday. Reply post, this always have been Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Again, make sure that your posts are detailed. I like references in there. Also, make sure that you reply to at least one post, but I like to see multiple replies. You don't get any additional points for extra posts, but it makes the discussion forum more interesting, and you get a chance to exchange with your various classmates and learn about each other, and sometimes even can help each other. Finally, your written assignments for this week, your state prison classification, which I went over a few minutes ago, and the course project, agency overview and background, which I'm going to go over in just a minute. Please take some time and complete the mid-quarter student survey. We always look at those. And then I remind you, let's continue to be strong and let's finish strong. So let's keep going at the same pace we started out, strong. And let's also, by the time we get to week 11, be at that same level. Reminding you, adversity is the springboard to success. I shared that with you in the open house, so you know what that is all about. So let's take a look at the course calendar for just a minute here. Here it is right here. Okay, the assignments for the week. You see them right here. Reading assignment. I already told you what that was, but always, like I tell students, click on these and it opens up and it tells you what your reading assignment is. And you already know based on what was in the module and what's in the announcements. And then your initial post tells you what issues facing jails is, and then your live lecture, and then your reply post. Notice again what I told you earlier, that all your initial posts have been due on Tuesday since week 2. Your initial post for week 1, because we didn't start our classes until that day, till Tuesday. Reading assignment was over on the 1st, but that's just the way it's set up. You're not graded on reading. reading assignments, but don't neglect them because you're not graded on them. Because I tell you the truth, there's things that students have asked me, and I can tell that they're not reading when they ask me those questions. And I ask them point blank, have you read the informational chapter? It is very important that you do that because you get an understanding about the topic for that particular week. And so then coming right down to the mid-quarter survey, written assignment, and then the course project, which we're going to go over in just a minute. So now let's go to the actual module. And let's look again at the assignments. Okay, so now let's look at the project for a minute. So now it's time for you to do your agency overview. And at this point, it tells you that there are certain things that you need to have. And mission statements is very important. There are students who sometimes say they couldn't find it. You should always be able to find that on their website or contact the agency itself, and they will tell you what their mission statement is, or they'll tell you where you could find it. And because the mission statement deals with the ethical and professional responsibility in the area. So now at this point, you have chosen papers or agencies that are either jails or prisons. And we're going to talk about the difference between the two. And dealing with probation or parole. These are, again, 4 areas that all of your papers had to be in, not law enforcement. And so you had to do your papers within these areas. So make sure that you cover these issues, okay? Make sure you have citations and references and a cover sheet in your assignment, okay, that's completed. Now, just so you'll know, let me go back for just a minute to the home page, even though I did share this with you before, but I want to go back again and show you specifically. Okay, here we go. The course, the module, and the rubric, and it tells you what you have. It's a total of 25 points. Student details the cost, population, and employee demographics of their agency. You get 7 points, and then you lose points if you fail to provide that. So the point of the matter is the more you cover these areas, the higher your grade is. To maximize the points, you want to be in exemplary. This is where you want to always look at, not here and not here, but in exemplary. Overviews provide complete and accurate discussion of cost, population, and the employee demographics. That's where you want to look at. Then 7 points for detailing the specifics based on the selected area. And you already said see project instructions. You already know that or should be able to go back and review that from week 1, the module, and also the open house. So you always want to be in this area, exemplary, under exemplary. Don't be incompetent. Don't be in progressing. Overview provides complete and accurate discussion on detailed specifics based on selected corrections area. So that's only 14 points of the 25. So you have to go down to the next page. So then it says here, using APA, and then your grammar included. 5 points. Now, it says use APA documentation consistently, citing sources, that's why I said, and include a title page. But you got to make sure that you include a citation and references. Example of APA documentation, and includes correct title page. So you get 3. Usually students lose points of 5 altogether because in the process of doing that, then there's some grammatical issues in there. But the key thing is make sure you do your APA. Now this says 3, but remember I said you'll end up losing 5 because inevitably what happens if you don't do the APA right, there's going to be some issues that fall within this section here. So anyway, this is what I said here. Says here that I have the discretion as to how I distribute these. So the key thing is that you want to get all 5 points, free of grammar and spelling errors, and satisfy your APA. Okay? And then, of course, digital fluency provides at least one website, and information is accurate and complete. So if you don't provide that information, student says you can't find the website. Almost every agency, I don't know of any that don't have a website at this time now. The ethical and professional responsibility understood. Interview includes reflection of the mission statement and is accurate and complete. And that totals your 25 points. So you want to make sure that you do satisfy those issues. Okay. So now let's go back. Let's go back to where we were. Okay. And let's go back to assignments. So you've got this section here understood as far as the project is concerned. Your written assignment then, make sure that you cover your state and identify, okay, good, and identify the number and types of prison utilized. Now, identify your state, what state that you're in, and what is the classification, the number of types of prisons that are in your area. Provide a brief overview, and how inmates are assigned. And then make sure you use APA and the same requirements here as well. All right, very, 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 very important. Sometimes students say, how many pages? It's not based on how many pages. It's based on, do you satisfy all of the requirements of the rubric that I gave a few minutes ago? And if it tells you that you have a certain number of pages, or if the exercise tells you a certain number of pages, you do that. But don't worry about that. Just make sure you have the information that's necessary. I'll be looking for that. And then your discussion posts. So that's the assignments for the week. Make sure that you have them in by Sunday, which I believe is the 28th. So now let's go into the last section. What we're going to deal with is jails versus prison. But again, this is reminding you of the things that we talked about. We're going to do jails versus prison, and we're going to do these 3 in a minute here. But the course project, I went over that. Remember, as I said to a student, research is involved all the time. Well, based upon what's required of you, you're going to have to do research. And then your state prison classification, discussions, and then, of course, the survey at the end. So now, before we get into, well, let's do this now. let's talk about what's the difference. Prisons and jails. Sometimes people use those, as it says, interchangeably, but actually there are two different types of incarceration. As you should know, jails generally a short term or a pretrial where a person is not able to make bail and they remain in jail until such time as they go to trial or they plead guilty. And so, anyway, it also is used for misdemeanors. And so, I asked my class the other night, uh, how do you know um, if a charge results in a misdemeanor conviction or felony? Um, the easy answer to that is very simply this, based upon the sentence. If it's under a year or year to a year under, then you actually have a misdemeanor. So if it's 1 year, 1 year, 1 day up to 365 days, which is a year, then it's a misdemeanor. If it goes a year and above, or 365 and above, then we move into felony. So jails generally don't have individuals who are convicted felons unless they're there from other cases. But I'm talking about for the case that they're being tried on or charged with at the present time. So overcrowding takes place a lot of times in jails and prisons, but jails because of the fact that people are not able to make bail, and so also people's bail are such sometimes that they can't even afford the small amount. And so what a lot of jurisdictions have done, like in our area in Illinois, Cook County, for example, the biggest county in the state, has come together with the state's attorney's office and the sheriff of Cook County to give I bonds or recognizance bonds to individuals who are not who are being charged with offenses that are not violent and not serious. So anyway, it's short term, and it says here whether you get a year or less. Anyone taken to jail is processed through booking. You go and you're booked first. The identification and fingerprinting, all that takes place. Some offenses allow quick release through posting a bond, as I said, while others require an additional appearance before the judge. And then I already talked about ROR, released on recognizance. And so the point of the matter is that. And jails are usually located pretty close to the courthouses. In our situation in Cook County, the main courthouse, criminal courts building at 26th in California and Chicago, the Cook County Jail is right there. And the same thing here in Will County. In Will County, the courthouse is downtown Joliet, and right behind that is the jail. So it's located usually right in the area and under the authority of the sheriff. Sheriff of Will County does the one here. Sheriff of Cook County does the one in Cook, and most other counties as well. And it talks about the fact that special attention must be paid to the age, especially if you have juvenile offenders. They're in a different category placed. They don't place them with the adults. Females are not placed in with the males, and they try to segregate those with mental health concerns. I can tell you that at Cook County, for example, they had a separate building that was for mental health, and it was called CERMAC. It was basically a hospital, but it was still in the walls of Cook County jails. But because there are budgetary issues, um, there are all kinds of problems where there's not as many qualified people that they have working. And now some have resorted to privatizing their services, and it's it's okay. But when you reach the stage that the jail itself is operated by a private entity other than the governmental entity, there are problems because what happens a lot of times is as part of the contract that the municipality or county or state does with a private organization, uh, they start to um, almost guarantee certain numbers. And guess what? That results in people being incarcerated just to get the numbers there. And that's not good. That's not good. But also, many services are outside medical and mental health care. The food service is almost all the time provided by an independent company, and even some programs are provided by outside. And so, anyway, even down to building the facilities. It talks about small jails. Some of you are in situations where you're dealing with small jails and they have limited space, and volunteers work the programs. Now, that's good and that's bad. What's good is you have people who want to provide services, but paid individuals are always the best because then that's their career. That's what they've decided to do. So if you have a volunteer, they might provide with religious services, and that's not uncommon. Um, there have been times when I've gone to jail years ago. I don't do it a lot now, but I would go and provide religious services to those incarcerated, pretty much in the Cook County Jail. Once in a while, I went to the prison, Stateville, and the old Joliet prison. So anyway, it talks about exercise equipment. There are issues they have because they don't have the money. Law library, which all inmates have access to or should have access to. I have learned as a lawyer that that's a double-edged sword because I have seen some of my clients come to court when I was practicing, and they would bring me their research and tell me some theories that they've come up with that I should try, or a certain motion that I should file. And I understand that when they study it and read it, that they're not professionals and that they don't apply, or either something I've already done, one or the other. But it's good that at least that the inmates have an opportunity to learn about their rights. And then some provide GED and basic education programs. And then those that are in need of drug and alcohol treatment programs. A few work release, but not a whole lot. And then alcoholics or narcotics organization in AA and NA, and some vocational programs. But there's problems because some of them don't have the resources to provide these things. And so overcrowding is an issue, and violence occurs, and usually violence and overcrowding go together. However, though, violence can also come about because of the gang elements. Various gangs need to be segregated to minimize the violence in the prisons themselves. And then mental health placements, again, there are financial restraints as well. And you know, it's bad when you have a inmate who is faced with some mental health issues placed in the population where there are others who are not, because then those individuals prey upon those mental health placements. Direct supervision of inmates is increasing, it says, more common as required inspections and improved quality of life for inmates. Uh, now, now that's jails. We've covered jails. So now let's talk about prisons. So the difference in jails and prisons, number one, I've already kind of given you that, is that you're more serious offenders, and there's a commitment of at least a year and a day. Now, listen to me. You don't go to prison until you've been convicted. You generally don't go to prison while you're awaiting trial. Generally, there are some exceptions, and those usually involve safety issues, but primarily you stay in the jail system until your conviction, either by pleading guilty or you're found guilty. And like I said again, it results in individuals who are convicted of felonies, which means that it's a year and a day and above. And many jurisdictions now find themselves with overcrowdedness as well. Now, it says here prisoners today are almost 90% state versus federal. And that's true because the crimes that generally are committed are state crimes as opposed to federal crimes. And so we're primarily focused on state prisons. Sometimes we deal with federal prisons. Male, 90+%. Sentenced for violent offenses, at least half or more. And there are some issues with racial and ethnic differences that take place in prison, as they do on the outside world. But remember, then you're isolated and you're there for a period of time. So that increases the likelihood that there could be violence or something along those lines. Now, the standard for correctional facilities is the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And in addition to federally run prisons, they're involved in custody and care of offenders who are confined through agreements with the state and local governments. So that's where the feds come in and help out. And then there are some, as I already talked about, privately or operated, and I told you I'm not a big fan of those because of the problems that take place. A lot of the private correctional centers don't have real good professionals working as correction officers there. And again, like I said, they're profit oriented. And so, again, their goal is to keep people incarcerated. In addition to the Bureau of Prison, there are 50 separate state departments of corrections that exist. Illinois Department of Corrections is ours, and almost every state has something that's called the Department of Corrections. Florida, Missouri, Minnesota. Most of our students are located in Florida or Minnesota or Illinois, Wisconsin. Those are all departments of corrections, as well as D.C. And again, all are caught in the same bag, dealing with costs and expenses, recidivism, repeat offenders, and then some institutional operations. So there are a number of things that take place in these prisons. Now, I will tell you this, that as far as correction facilities, particularly with prisons, but also jails, there is a watchdog group called the John Howard Association. You want to Google it and check it out. What they do is they come in and they determine how humane the facilities are. And but John Howard, and a little history of John Howard. John Howard goes back to, oh God, I can't remember, maybe the early 1900s, maybe even further back, where to make sure that individuals were not incarcerated, in inhumane conditions, that it wasn't like some of the Bastilles in France, that you're chained to the wall all the time, or that you are isolated all the time, and those kind of things. But prisons have classifications, and the classifications are built on what kind of facility it is, such as the minimum security. Now, when you hear the term minimum, that's telling you these are individuals who are probably not violent offenders, and then they are going to have more flexibility, living in a dorm, a more relaxed security situation, and can often attend school and work. That's where you find the minimum. The medium is now, you got more serious crimes, double bunked, um, guard towers spacing, control access, and industrial and educational activities as well. The big walls may exist. In the minimum security prisons, you may not have the big walls. And you sometimes do have them, but it's a different scenario. Maximum security, when you get there, now we're talking about real violent offenders, walls. These are some of the ones that you see in the old movies, or in the movies now. You can see the differences. There's observation posts, decks, or areas, or bridges for the security officers or the correction officers to watch. The toilet and sink is usually in the cell. There's a watchtower and armed guards, and there's restricted movement within the cell block or pod, and that's to keep order, because sometimes they can get out of control. And then there's the real bad dudes, supermax, which individuals, because of whatever the circumstances that they're there for, they're released out maybe about an hour or two, and other than that, they're in lockdown. Then there's camera surveillance, cement walls, and there's no communication with each other, and it's basic isolation that you're placed in supermax. But like I said again, there are some individuals who are placed in those situations as well. Prisons are designed involve radio, telephone poles, courtyards, and a campus, and they vary depending on the classification of one of the four above. Now, the one who's in charge of the prison is often called the warden. You've heard that already. You probably already knew that. And associate wardens manage with certain services within the department. And then it's important that the wardens follow the law. Otherwise, there could be civil suits filed by the individuals for being held longer than they're supposed to, or living in situations that are inhumane. Also, suits are filed oftentimes by inmates because they feel like they want to have special food, or they try to sometimes play the game of utilizing religion as a way of getting favors, and it's some crazy stuff. So anyway, wardens have a very serious job. Now, I will tell you this, that, for example, like in Stateville, one of my former students who was a correction officer, she reached the stage of major. She was over the Stateville prison sometimes when the warden is not around, and she's been able to maintain the control. And so she explains the same thing that you'll hear in these videos, is that how is it done? There's respect that's done between the individuals and her, and she's fair with them, firm, and then consistent. And you don't have favorites. If you do, you're going to create a problem there. So that's the difference between jails and prisons. But the biggest difference is, of course, the length of time that that person is or what stage they are. So we're going to do an interview uh, in a second. And then I'm going to try to do at the end this lockdown. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But right now, I'm going to uh, remove my headset because you can hear the sound better, I'm told. Uh, okay, now let's go and let's try to.
Tell me about your background and your position here in Sherburne County.
Sure. Well, I worked at the Sherburne County Jail for the past 18 years. Over the past 18 years, I've held the capacity of a corrections officer, of a jail sergeant, the jail captain, and currently I'm the assistant jail administrator.
Okay. And your background?
Before that, I worked for Cub Foods. I was assistant produce manager. I was going to St. Cloud State University when I was the assistant produce manager. And then I had an opportunity to apply for Sherburne County, which I did, and I was accepted. Before that, I was in the Marine Corps Reserve. I was a veteran for the first Gulf War, which I learned a lot of things. Was an experience that I'll never forget. Gained a lot of experience out of that. Before that, I was at St. Cloud State University. So I went from St. Cloud State University. I joined the Marine Corps Reserve. I didn't graduate at that point, and ended up getting activated for the Gulf War. And when the Gulf War was done, came back and went back to school and worked at Cub Foods.
Okay. Can you tell us about the setup of your jail and the types of inmates you serve?
Yes, our jail is actually it's kind of a unique jail. We hold federal inmates, so we have a contract with the U.S. Marshal Service and Immigration to hold federal inmates. Most of the inmates that we have are federal inmates. On any given day, we have about 80 to 100 county inmates. The rest of our inmate population are federal. We have pushed over 600 inmates a couple years ago. We're pushing that every day. Recently, it's dropped down to about 400 on any given day. Inside the jail, its design is unique as well. There's three different kind of styles of the layout of the facility. We have linear style, we have modular remote, and we have direct supervision.
What do those things mean?
The linear style jail is basically a day room that has cells attached to the day room, and there's not a corrections officer that's in the unit that's watching the unit all the time. The corrections officers make rounds, so they have to make rounds every 15 to 30 minutes, going through and just making sure that things are okay. It's a difficult area to control because you're not always observant on what's going on in there, so it makes it more difficult. What we've done with that area is made it into a special management area. So this is where we have our lockdown inmates. So if they go into disciplinary sanctions, they're locked down 23 hours a day, and they have 1 hour out where they can go into the day room. And once they have that hour out, they can use the phone, they can shower, read the paper. So that's basically what they're able to do during that hour. We only have or allow one person out at a time, so there's no contact between the inmates back there in our disciplinary setting. So, but when I first started, that was our jail. It was a linear style jail, and we would end up going to situations where we were usually putting sex crimes. Those crimes typically aren't very well thought of by the general population, and those people can be subject to manipulation, subject to some extortion, and they're subject to being able to be assaulted in the facility. So we want to pull those people out, keep them safe, and we have a workstation that's in a hallway that has glass that overlooks that area, and that's the pocket wall. It's a little bit better than the linear supervision for watching the inmates because you've got sight of line, so you're able to see the inmates, throughout the day, but you don't really hear what's going on in there. But it works well for what we have, and then we have direct supervision. Direct supervision is our general population, and in that area we have corrections officers in with the inmates throughout the entire day, and that works real well because not only do you see the inmates all the time, but you're walking, you're talking, and you get a lot of information. You get to hear what's going on inside the unit, and you'll hear this from corrections officers that have been around who feel what's going on in the unit. So you get to know and feel the vibe that's going on inside that housing unit.
Okay. You touched on this, but could you talk more about administrative issues in the jail?
Sure. Our administrative duties are to make sure that the facility is being run according to state law, constitutional law, following our policies and procedures. So we, in administration, we write the policy and procedures for the staff to follow, and we make sure that the staff are following them. We take care of the hiring, the staff discipline. We make sure that all the needs of the facility are met. We have female inmates in custody. We have federal inmates in custody. We have immigration inmates in custody. And we have our county inmates in custody. And we just make sure that the facility is being run in the right direction.
Okay. What are some issues facing jails today?
One of the biggest issues that we have, and it's different from when I first started 18 years ago, is mental illness in corrections. The mental illness facilities that we had back, when I first started 18 years ago have been shut down, and there's not a lot of options to be able to send people who are in need of controlling their mental illness through medication and doctors. They're not around anymore, so they are kept in the jails. We have probably 1/3 of our population on psychotropic medication. So that's probably one of the biggest issues that we face that is a change from when I first started.
You mentioned your background. Can you tell us what are the minimum qualifications to be a correctional officer?
Sure. The minimum qualifications is a valid driver's license. You have to be a high school graduate, and that's your basic minimum qualifications. Now, when we go through the interview process, and we're looking for people that are well-rounded, people that are great communicators, and we look for people that have had 2-year degrees, 4-year degrees, so that is more appealing when you go through the interview process, and you're more likely to get a job with a 2-year or 4-year degree.
Okay. Do you have any advice for today's students?
One of the things that we push in corrections is firm, fair, and consistent. So to get into this business, it's very important for you to be firm on the rules, consistent with the rules, and you have to be fair with the rules. You can't be allowing one individual to do something that you're not allowing another individual to do. Going through the interview process is very important to do a little research on what you're getting into. So when you're going through the interview process, you're able to, it doesn't mean
Okay, so you saw some of the things, if you pay attention to this video, we were talking about, if you notice how individuals are classified. It's based on the information that we talked about, I shared with you a minute ago. You notice that the more violent offenders were kept locked down in situations where even as many as 23 hours a day that they were locked down. And then they also had the minimum security setup where, you know, the officers made rounds. And the more severe the sentence of the individual, the crime that the person is in there for, then it could go all the way up to supermax that we were talking about earlier. But you will discover that this particular place, they had a combination of federal and state. Most of the time that we're dealing with things, we're talking about primarily state as opposed to federal prisoners. But you can be rest assured that the same issues. And then one of the things that was pointed out, and this is something that I shared with you guys in replying to your discussion post this week, is that one of the major issues facing jails today and prisons is mental illness, or the mental person with mental issues, and the budgetary restraints that are placed there. And those individuals are incarcerated and sometimes in the same areas where they have individuals who are not. And I already told you that they become victims themselves again in there. And then they mentioned sex offenders. I didn't mention this earlier, but most people know this, that individuals who are sex offenders, particularly pedophiles, when they are incarcerated, they have to segregate those individuals because one thing that I've learned in my years of dealing with criminal justice is that criminals don't like pedophiles. They don't like people like that. That guy that I'm sure you guys have seen on the news in Michigan, in Lansing, the Dr. Nasser, who sexually assaulted many of the gymnasts. I think over 150 testified during his sentencing hearing, and today he was sentenced to a minimum of 40 years and a maximum, I think, of 175. But you also, if people says 40, I says, well, he also has before that on some other charges. He must serve 60 years of that other charge before the 40 started. So if you add those together, that's 100. So that's why they said he's not ever going to get out. But my point being with this guy is that they're going to have some very serious issues. It was. I agree with you. Devastating. It's so sad because I think of many of the gymnasts that some of my favorite, Dominique Dawes, going way back many years ago, and what's the young lady's name? Simone Biles. As a matter of fact, she was one of the ones who testified with her encounters with this doctor too as well. So anyway, the point of the matter is that he's going to have a real serious issue when he goes to jail because of the fact that he's going to have problems with protection. We had another situation here in Will County, and it went national. They even did a Lifetime movie about this guy by the name of Drew Peterson, who was a former Bolingbrook police officer. Bolingbrook is a town, for those of you outside of Illinois, that's right near Romeoville, where the Romeoville campus is. And it's actually probably, I can probably get there in about 5 to 10 minutes from where I'm living now. But at any rate, this officer was found guilty of killing his wife, and so he was sentenced and found guilty. And his problem is that he's a police officer who helped incarcerate people. Now he's on the other side of the bars with them. And then while he was in there, he was charged with trying to hire an inmate to put a hit out on the prosecutor, James Glasgow, the Will County prosecutor, who was the lead prosecutor in that resulted in the incarceration of Drew Peterson. And he got some more years for that, I think 25 or maybe 30. So the bottom line is I've talked to my student that I was talking about earlier, and she was telling me about the things that she knew that were involved. They had to keep moving him, and they keep moving him because of the fact that there's hits out on his life. So anyway, the point of the matter is that there are issues there. Then one of the other issues that was mentioned in the video by the assistant jail administrator, Frank, he pointed out, and he clarified it by saying, number one, he said that the minimum requirement was a driver's license and a high school diploma. But he said after that we are looking for people who have associates and bachelor's degrees. And the reason why that is because they're looking for better professionals. And so that is why you guys are in school now, seeking to get your associates, and then ultimately you want to climb up to the higher level, get your bachelor's. That's what the young lady did. That was my student. She got her associate's degree with honors. And then now she was working and raising kids and a single parent while she did all of that. And then she went and got her bachelor's and completed that. And now she wants to go to law school, so I'm working with her on that. But the point of the matter is that you're in a profession that requires education. Notice something else they said. Remember we were talking about the transferable skills, and one of the transferable skills that they mentioned right off the bat was communication. And, you have to be effective in your oral and written communication because you have to write reports that end up in court and those kinds of things as well. So it's very, 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 very important there. And so those are some of the points that we've covered, and we remind our students that if you're going to work in the area, you want to get your education. You want to be able to be a good communicator. You're going to operate in an ethical fashion. We had a exercise in one of my classes I did where they were challenged by an inmate, and the inmate, they had to decide what they were going to do, and they had to follow the rules. That was an ethical issue. One other thing that I want to point out to you, and I said this earlier because I've worked with enough individuals or students I've had who were correction officers or are correction officers, firm, fair, and consistent. And that's with the rules. And, you start to show favoritism, and then you got a problem. And so that's pretty much how the whole thing operates in the jails. There are variations that they have in terms of them, but there are certain things that consistently go with it. So now let's see if I can do it. I don't know if it's going to happen. Let's try to see if we can take a look at this Minnesota Correctional Facility, and let's see if it comes over or not. Let's see. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. Okay. Let's see. I know we have a lot of problems trying to get that clip going. Let's see. I'm going to try to see if, well, here's what you're looking at right here. Is that in these maximum security facilities, these are weapons that are made by inmates. This is called a shank. And what they do is they wrap something around some metal and make it into a knife. Look at what they do with the toothbrush. They'll sharpen the edge of the toothbrush and use that as a weapon, as innocent a thing as a toothbrush. And you can see the various things that are done. Let's see, I can push this up a little bit, yeah. And you can see all these dangerous weapons that could end up in the facility. So now let's see if I can get it. Let's see. See if I can. Well, they might just have the photos. Let's see. I know they used to have the actual videos themselves. Let's see if it comes up. Forget about that, how to squeeze extra hard-earned cash. Let's try the full episodes because sometimes it comes up. Okay, let's see. Yep, it's not working. It's not working. So anyway, I'm going to have to talk to them about how that works. Explore the link inside the facility. More from this episode includes a gallery of photos. So basically, it's not that easy. But you can get this, they say, if you go to the Minnesota Department of Corrections, which is the Minnesota. So those of you in Minnesota, here's a link right here for you, right here, that goes to the Minnesota Department of Corrections. And just click on it so we can see what it says here. And notice, look at what it does. It provides information about Minnesota. And I think in every jurisdiction, you can probably find something like that. Employment, victim support, community, what facilities they have, and where they located, and those kind of things. About the agency, there's the budget. There's more about the agency. See, like there's your mission. There's your stuff right there. So those of you who are looking in now from Minnesota, you say, "Oh, thank you, Professor." Yes, you're welcome. But that same thing can be done in other jurisdictions as well. History, and then you go over here. You got the budget, diversity, news, and so forth and so on. The policies that take place as well. So there you go, right there. Those of you who are in Minnesota, and that will help you. So, and that's about it. Where are you? Where are you located, Jasmine? Are you in Illinois? Or are you in Minnesota? Oh, okay. Okay. I thought you were. I thought I was right. So then you. Oh, okay. You're right by Stateville. Okay, well, don't hang out outside too much. So that means you're right off of Route 53. Right off of 53. Yeah. I live in Romeoville, right near. And it's no big deal. I live near Renwick and Weber, and I always tell students that if you go east on Renwick from Weber and you get to Route 53, if you make a left, you go to College, because Lewis is that way. Or you make a right, you got Stateville, and you head technically to what's called Crest Hill. Some people still say it's Joliet, but it's technically Crest Hill. but yeah, you know what I'm talking about there. Um, so anyway, any questions? Oh, you do. Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, I'm right at the Walgreens there. They're building this car dealership in front of where I live. And now you know exactly where it is, a McDonald's right in front of it. So, you know exactly there. So, but yeah, I like it. I like it. Not too far from the Romeoville campus either. It's just up the road from me there. So, okay, I'm going to say uh, you can if they allow it. I forgot who you doing your interview with. What agency? Okay. Which correction facility? Is it near you? Not Stateville. Oh, 5 hours away. Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Well, that's fine. Um, oh, okay. That must be one of the IDOC locations, Illinois Department of Corrections. Pontiac, Vandalia. Those sound familiar? Yeah. Okay. I know. I was just trying to see from here. But at any rate, okay. So you're coming along pretty good with that. It's the IDOC, right? Illinois Department of Corrections. Okay. I agree with that one. Uh, it's an IDOC, Illinois Department of Corrections. Oh, okay, great. So then you know you've already discovered the website. It has almost like that Minnesota. It's very, 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 very comprehensive. You have a lot of good information on the website that you can get the mission statement and the demographics, the budget, all those things that I just showed you from Minnesota. So, all right. Well, with that, I'm going to say it's about a quarter to 10. I'm going to say good night, and I am going to be doing some more grading between tonight and uh, tomorrow. I have yet to grade just two more classes. I usually do discussion posts at the end, so you'll have that. But all grading for week 3 is due by the end of the week. So you will receive them by no later than Sunday. You might already have them depending on what section are you in. Are you in section 1, 2, or 3? Which section are you in of the class? You think section 2? Yeah, well, I already graded the written assignments for section 2 and 3. 1 is the last one I have to do for this course. So, okay, at any rate. So I'm going to say good night, and I'm going to end this session. I will be sending out a recording after this. All right. Good night, and thanks for coming out.